This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World. Hello, podcast listeners. Today's episode features Phaidra Yunker as our guest. Phaidra is a plant enthusiast. She's got a green thumb. She is a theater enthusiast. She's also a forgotten television show enthusiast, and she likes her sci-fi hard. Plus, Tucker and I get into a disagreement about what the content of this episode actually entails. All of that and more on today's episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
My favorite kind of a buffet, if pressed, is a Chinese buffet, followed up by a brunch breakfast buffet, where I'm taking more breakfast items than lunch items. And then third on the list would be a KFC, as I like to call it, Kentucky buffet. The downside of each of these buffets is I don't know when to say when. I'm a man who likes to consume. And when they say all you can eat at a buffet, I take it as a personal challenge. Mm-hmm. Do you like buffets?
I do. My top number one would be Indian food buffet. Mm-hmm. My number two, which I like saying number two, would be pizza. My third favorite is Chinese food. And but ultimately it really comes down to, you know, if I like the food. Like, I've never been to a good taco buffet, unfortunately, because when I make homemade tacos, that's effectively a taco buffet, and that's good. Mm-hmm. But I've never been to a restaurant that buffets out the tacos.
Even the Juanos one?
That's right. I forgot about that. Well, we don't have it anymore.
I know.
So we don't get to
You
claim
know
that
what's
anymore.
great is they follow, like, the end of the buffet was chocolate or carrot cake, which was just a small slice of heaven.
Yeah, but even that one, it was good, but not always perfect. Like, there were definite improvements they could have made to that buffet.
Yeah.
Maybe they'd still be in business had they done that.
I've been to some bad buffets in my life where I just go like, oh,
yeah,
come on. And usually those are in truck stops. Now, I'm not saying that all truck stops have bad buffets. I'm just saying most. No, because I think that there are some good truck stop buffets.
Have you seen one? Have you been to one?
Hold on, let me think about it. Truck stops I've been to on a frequent basis.
By the way, you know why that's not a real Kentucky buffet?
Why?
No grits.
Oh, I still call it the Kentucky buffet.
I get why you call it that, because KFC.
But it should have grits.
If it's going to be Southern food, it's going to be. You got to have grits.
That's your only thing, like
That is the thing that makes it not a Kentucky buffet.
just the grits.
That it does not have grits.
Interesting, because I would say like it's also in the how they do their mac and cheese,
Right.
how they do their collard greens.
Remember, they are no longer Kentucky Fried Chicken.
They are KFC.
They are KFC.
They're like, we've heard enough from the people of Kentucky. We don't want to keep pissing them off. Speaking of Kentucky, where according to what I know about people from the South, people marry their cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
I'm sure that's
So you
true.
have a wedding where two cousins get married and it's got grits.
Pretty much I'm pretty sure all Southerners, my family included, did nothing but marry each other.
See, I always find it to be like, I don't appreciate it when people have the like, well, in Fargo, you guys would ride your horses and work. And so like, I don't want to perpetuate that. I will tell you this. Our guest today, we discover a kinship between Phaidra Yunker and myself.
Not during the podcast, though. That happened afterwards.
No, that was during the podcast, wasn't it?
That was after.
That was after?
Remember,
we don't even talk about it?
Because I said, why did we not say this during the podcast?
It turns out that our guest today and I are related. We did not know that.
Yeah.
We just started mentioning it. It's a good thing that we got that out there in the open before, I don't know, like...
you started making out or something?
Well, I was going to suggest, like, before we got into business together, like, saying, like, why don't you become the permanent co-host of JJ Meets World? And then we find out that there's nepotism involved because we're related.
Today I found out we're hiring a co-host.
Yeah. I always like to keep my options open. So sit back and relax, folks. This episode of JJ Meets World is going to be interesting to those of you who enjoy forgotten television shows or enjoy gardening. The gardening talk is on point.
In deep. I mean, if anything, we should have had her on at the same time as Maz, because those two could have had some very deep plant talk, and we'll probably have to arrange that at some point.
Back, forth, up, down, left, right, green, chlorophyll, more like borophyll.
What kind of tree do you think would be his favorite?
Maz?
Yeah.
An Irish sheepdog tree. Is that a tree? I don't know.
A pachine tree.
A bangers and mash tree. So I want you guys to enjoy this episode with Phaidra Yunker. She previously appeared in a show with Tucker that we don't even talk about called Kuwait at Theater B.
Done a lot of Theater B stuff. She's been really active in the theater community in town. And then she's also known for the quality of her backyard, like how nicely she keeps all the plants and everything. She's got a real green thumb, or two green thumbs.
Which we even talk about the origin of the term green thumb. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And while you're enjoying it, swing on over to Patreon and make a donation. Patreon.com/JJ Meets World.
JJ Meets World.
Phaidra, are you brand specific when it comes to lip balms?
I am actually super brand specific when it comes to lip balms. So I have terrible allergies to lots of things that are in like Burt's Bees. So people don't realize this, but it has lanolin in it, which is like a wool oil. So if you're allergic to wool and you're using Burt's Bees over and over again, you're just rubbing wool oil on your lips and they get progressively chappier.
Interesting.
Whoa.
So brand specific Vaseline. That's what I like.
Just straight up Vaseline.
That's the best, at least for me. Yeah.
Petroleum jelly.
Petroleum jelly.
And so do you get like the little tiny ones, or do you walk around with like a full size in your purse?
I usually get a little tiny one and then I refill it with, I have a vat of Vaseline. So refill it with the vat.
I've recently tried several brands because I always call it chapstick, but it's not, because chapstick is a brand.
Yep.
I tried Blistex. I tried Carmex. I did not like Carmex. And I'll tell you why I wouldn't like Vaseline either. I got to get my finger dirty to use it.
Yep.
I don't care for that.
You prefer a stick form.
I do. I like being
it's
able
nice
to do
and
that.
neat.
Does Vaseline make a stick form?
I don't think so.
They should.
They should make a stick form. But
I
then
think-
they'd have to add like surfactants or something to get it to stay in the stick form. So with people with sensitive skin, surfactants are the enemy.
Maybe they could just sell us a syringe.
Yeah.
But it's got like a little tip at the end, so you're pushing it out like that.
Yeah, well, they make like girl chapsticks that are, or lip balms or lip glosses that are like squeezy with like a little paintbrush on the end or a little like foam tip. So that would work.
Yeah,
Get
those
on
got
it,
a lot of sparkles
Vaseline
in them.
brand. Yeah.
So tell us who you are as a person now that we know about your
Chapstick
That's a
preferences.
dark road. I don't think you want to go
lanolin.
down that road with Phaidra, dude.
Well, that's a
It's open-ended.
pretty general question.
About as open-ended as you can get.
I like this question because you are going to decide what information that you want to give to us and the listeners. So I know information about you already,
Yeah.
but I'm curious to know what you think is important to tell people. Like, for instance, if you asked me that question, be like, I brought 2 different receptacles for drinking today.
Yes. Yeah, I did. I always coffee and water. I suppose I think probably the number one thing that I tell people is that I'm a native North Dakotan. I grew up Missouri River Valley, which is completely different than the Red River Valley. People kind of rag on this side of the state because it is so flat. But the central part of the state is just rolling hills, really beautiful. We have a family farm right on the river, and it's one of my most favorite places. So then, yeah, transplant to Fargo. I like theater. Obviously, I like gardening. That's what I do for my profession. I'm a book nerd. I love sci-fi. Huge sci-fi fan.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What was the last sci-fi book that you remember really being like, yeah?
The Expanse series. It's James S.A. Corey, which oddly enough is 2 men, and I don't know their actual names, but their pen name is James S.A. Corey, and they happen to be George R.R. Martin, who wrote Song of Ice and Fire, so Game of Thrones series. They happen to be his assistants.
Ooh.
So yeah, and Sci-Fi Channel tried to turn the Expanse series into a show, and I know a lot of people were big fans of it, but I really wasn't.
Was that the one where they were really getting a lot of the science right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I've
and
heard
that's
of it, yeah.
and that's what's great about the books. And so Leviathan Wakes, I think I picked that up in like 2014 or something, and now they're on book 7, and it's just this epic space opera. I mean, just so good. The science is so good, and that's probably the last one that. I mean, the books are a good like 3 inches thick, and you can get through them in a week because that's how good they are. You can't put them down. I'm trying to slog through something by Kim Stanley Robinson right now that's supposed to be good. And it is good, but it's just kind of a slow read. It's called Red Moon. So that's what I'm in the middle of right now.
When you talk about Expanse being turned into like programming, I devoured Ready Player One when I first read it. And I was like, the movie, oh my God, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And I was like, meh.
Yeah. And that tends to happen with me too. Ready Player One, I haven't read the book. I am intrigued to read the book now after seeing the movie. The other one that I was just super disappointed in was Ender's Game.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
that book. I love that book. And then the movie, I'm like, ugh, Ender Wiggin is supposed to be like 6 years old when the book starts. And so obviously they had to cast an older kid. I can't think of the kid's name, but I think he was like 14, you know? Mm-hmm. So you can't really like, I don't know, cast a bunch of 6-7-year-old kids and then beat the shit out of them on camera.
The kid from Ender's Game has gone on to make a bunch of other very forgettable movies. Like, why do we keep putting this kid into movies? The last one was like the kid who was born on Mars. Like his mom was pregnant.
Yeah,
and he's born on
I
Mars,
didn't see
and
that. I didn't see
Gary
that.
Oldman was like, his heart can't take the gravity on Earth.
yeah. And it's like a sappy, like teenage, angsty YA kind of a thing.
I went to a movie yesterday that's aimed at children. Okay. So it's the kid who would be king.
Yeah. I was intrigued by the preview for that.
So was my wife. So much so that she was like, opening day, we gotta go. And I was just like, I just want to stop seeing this preview before everything. So we go to that movie, and there are 3 trailers in a row that specifically prey on your emotions, so much so that everyone in the theater's crying. Number 1, they made a sequel to the movie A Dog's Purpose.
Oh, God.
Where the whole point of the movie is the dog dies like 9 times to only get back to Dennis Quaid.
As other dogs. Yeah.
So in this one, he starts off as being Dennis Quaid's new dog, and Dennis Quaid like knows that the soul of his dog is going into other dogs.
Yeah.
And their granddaughter is taken away. So he's like, take care of my granddaughter. Which is just ridiculous. And it also shows the ending because it shows her going onto the porch to like reconnect with her grandparents.
Yeah.
And he's like, Bailey, is that you in this new dog's body?
Well, and was that the one where the first one, there was a bunch of...
The PETA complaints?
Yeah. There was some sort of kerfuffle about...
the mistreatment of the dog.
Mistreatment
which
of the
I
dog.
think ended up being debunked.
I think so, too.
After that. But, whoever had that footage waited until... 4 days before the movie came out?
Yeah, I have no idea.
And then the next movie was about 2 kids who have cystic fibrosis, and if you have cystic fibrosis, you can't get within 6 feet of somebody else who has cystic fibrosis because they're particular.
Immunocompromised or
yeah. Like you can actually make the other person like less healthy with what you have or whatever. So like the nurse can go and touch both of them, but they can't touch each other. And of course, these 2 young kids who have CF fall in love in the hospital, and they're like, we're going to close it from 6 feet to 5 feet. And that's going to be the thing.
Yeah.
Then the third preview is this one with that lady from This Is Us, where her son falls through, like the beginning of the trailers.
That's right.
Like our town's small. Everybody knows everyone. They're like, hi, Miss Jenkins. She's like, hi, girls. How y'all doing? And then her son's like this basketball star in middle school. And our pastor at our church, played by Topher Grace. And then it sets this weird tone. And then Tyler Labine walks onto a porch, goes, get off the ice. And her son falls through the ice, is under the ice for 45 minutes. And they pull him out, and then so it's all about how God saved their son.
I was going to say that seems probably like a Christian,
And so, the end is her standing on the roof of the hospital, and she's crying. She's like, I surrender, God, I surrender. But it does play on your emotions because you're watching this kid fight for his life in a coma.
And you don't need to see the movie now.
No,
you can just,
you don't. All three of them, they
Yeah.
give away the plot of every single one.
Yeah, through God's love, her child survives, and then this kid with cancer in the next room, he's just messed. He's just like,
Atheist.
that's it. He's just dead. He's gonna die now. Yep.
It's like, why are we Lutheran? And so I'm watching all three of these things, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, Hollywood, I understand that you don't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over again, but you're just trying to get me to cry, so I'll go see these movies. Stop doing that and make a decent Ender's Game movie.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or actually, I'm surprised that didn't become a series. Like I could see like one of like the paid for cable networks, not necessarily an HBO, but like a Showtime, doing a really good version of Ender's Game, where they do kick the shit out of little kids.
Yeah. Or little kids kick the shit out of each other.
Right, yeah, I guess that's what
Or maybe do an animated version of it.
Well, and I've seen that it's on Netflix, but I haven't watched it yet because I'm worried about being disappointed. The Watership Down adaptation.
Yeah.
That book is dark as fuck.
And the old cartoon is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think that was drawn by the same people that did the
Rankin and Bass. It was it wasn't the guys that did The Hobbit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so that and I vaguely recollect watching that. But Watership Down, I think I probably read that book like in 3rd grade, and then I go to my dad and I'm like, the rabbits die.
It is raw.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that The Secret of Nim was the darkest movie I had ever seen.
Dark.
And then I read the book and I was like, oh, snap, they didn't even get halfway.
What about the never-ending story when his horse dies?
Artax?
My cousin, when my sister and I were little, my older cousin Ben goes, "You guys want to watch a movie?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You guys like horses?" And we went, "Yeah." And he put in the never-ending story.
Have you watched that again as an adult?
No.
It's really boring.
Is it?
Yeah.
It takes forever.
Yeah, it's not. It's like it's one of those movies that I kind of wish I would have left back then. I mean, I have a copy of it, and I was hoping that there would be like some special feature. I'm totally like a director's commentary nerd. Like I love director's commentaries, so I was hoping there'd be some special features, and there really isn't on the DVD that I have. But
what's the name of the wolf thing that's chasing?
Well, it's the Nothing.
No, it's the Morlock.
The Morlock.
The Morlock.
Yeah. This is all that's left of Fantasia.
That kid couldn't just scream out the name like Helen or anything. It's so frustrating.
This is the thing. This is the kicker. Do you know what his mom's name is? You know how he has to shout his name the princess the best name he can ever think of, and it's his mother's name. Do you know what?
Don't tell me it's Martha.
No. Do you know what it is?
What?
Moonchild.
Moonchild.
His mom's name is Moonchild?
Isn't that the worst thing ever? That's legit. That you can Wikipedia that. That is the name that he shouts out. And it is, when I found that out, I was like, come on. That's, Moonchild. So anyway.
We're so lucky that he picked up the Never-Ending Story that day and didn't steal a Goosebumps book instead, right?
Oh, Jack Black would have been out of a job.
You know what it's actually making me think of is what's the Page Master?
Yeah.
Yeah,
with
Macaulay
Culkin. I always loved that movie so much that the book, the pirate book, would appear in my dreams as a kid
Oh,
as like
awesome.
a recurring character
Yeah,
that I would
that's
hang
awesome.
out with.
Be attracted to ladies.
One of the ones that stands the test of time is The Labyrinth, and I can remember. So we had that on VHS along with Dark Crystal, which they're doing a Dark Crystal adaptation right now.
Yeah.
But we brought that to Easter, I think, and I have pretty large extended family, and kind of the same thing. Do you want to watch a movie, cousins? And I think my youngest cousin was probably 6 years old, scared the shit out of them. Like when she opens up the crib and the baby's gone,
Yeah.
and then there's the creepy puppet. And I mean, that's scary. I mean, it's scary. And we still joke about it. I mean, this is almost 30 years later that we still joke about scaring the shit out of my cousin Mary, because we, thinking it's going to be bones or a dead baby in there or something. But that movie's awesome.
I remember
Love that movie.
being scared of the scene in Hook when they come and steal the kids.
Yeah. That is. I actually just watched that recently.
And then that
movie's
woman's
great.
like, the children were
screaming. The children were. Hook is back.
That's right.
Yeah.
Have to
I've
fight.
lost my marbles.
Have to fly. Have to crow. Have to save Maggie. Have to save Jack.
Hookies. Yeah.
I do remember that vividly.
And I remember Julia Roberts and
Yeah,
being like,
Bob
I feel
Hoskins.
funny.
Okay, so I'm going to say something and probably make some people mad, but I really don't prefer Julia Roberts as an actress. I really
In
don't.
anything or
Pretty
just
much
like,
anything.
Really?
I thought you were going to say Bob Hoskins, and I was about to kick you out of this
I
room.
love Bob Hoskins.
Good.
Love
What about
Bob
Smee?
Hoskins.
What about Smee? Smee is me. So not even not Mystic Pizza.
It's been a really long time since I've seen
What
that.
about Steel Magnolias?
I like that movie a lot,
Pretty
but I
Woman.
can't get over her face when
Eat,
they
Pray,
feed her
Love.
The
I've
juice.
never seen that.
When you like
Yeah.
drink your juice,
Yeah.
Shelby. Drink
Yeah.
your juice.
Yeah. But I do love that movie. But I mean, you can't. I mean,
Ocean's 11, 12, 13.
I don't honestly. It's really funny. I haven't
She's not
seen
in
most of
13.
those.
Oh, she's not 13?
She is not in 13.
I have not seen 13. I just assumed she was.
In Ocean's 12, she not only plays her character Tess, but she also plays herself, Julia Roberts.
See, and that's my issue with her is she's always Julia Roberts in everything that she's in. Whereas like Kate Blanchett disappears. Tilda Swinton disappears. Julia Roberts is always Julia Roberts, just
See,
in a different
She
costume.
doesn't have the androgyny factor those two
That's funny
as
that you
well.
mentioned. Well, it's probably why I like those two ladies.
Hell yeah.
I'm trying to think of like a really good Julia Roberts role where she disappears, and Mary Riley.
I don't think I've seen
Kate-
that one. There's something that she came out with more recently, some sort of thriller that I haven't seen, and so maybe she's good in that. But I
Is
don't.
that a Netflix original?
No.
Are you
There's
thinking about
one.
Homecoming?
Homecoming. That's
Okay.
that I haven't seen that.
That's
but-
on Amazon Prime,
yeah,
I think.
that's Amazon Prime. But
Yeah,
so as Tinkerbell, I just thought she was very awkwardly cast, like this, 6 foot tall woman as
But think
Tinkerbell.
about it, for 99.9% of her time on screen, she's not with anybody else.
Yeah.
Like it's all done afterwards. And so it's just her and like Steven Spielberg, and he's like, no, more tinking. Be more tink.
Except
Be
when
more
she gets
Tink.
the lip lock with Robin Williams.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is-
the 0.01% of the movie where she's big and she's like, oh, I wish I was big. Oh, also, let's talk about this. The only other trailer that was involved in the kid who wanted to be king.
Yeah.
I keep calling it The Kid in King Arthur's Court. You guys remember that movie?
Yep.
I do remember
Yep.
that movie.
With Thomas Ian Nichols before he's in American Pie. So the other movie was this movie where Regina King is a super bitch, and she's like, I am the head of this business, and her assistant gets treated like crap the whole time. And then one night her assistant's like, I just wish that, you would know what it's like to be
Well, do
treated
they
like this.
Switch places?
No.
Oh.
She wakes up the next day and she's a 12-year-old kid.
Oh,
So it's literally the reverse
of 13 going on 30.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. Like
Again, just recycling plots.
right,
Just
over and
recycling
over.
plots.
Because
Yeah,
let's face it, that was kind of a ripoff of Big.
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I just don't know what's going on in Hollywood. Let's talk about gardening.
Okay. What
So
do
you got a
know?
green thumb, huh? Do you have two of them?
Yes, I do. I have
What,
two
do you know where
very
that
green
term
thumbs.
comes from?
No idea.
Neither do I.
Well, okay, so this might be where it comes from, in my opinion. So there are things that you do to plants when you're an avid gardener, and one of them is called deadheading. So you have to pinch the blossom off when it's spent. There's
Like on a marigold.
Yep. So get into a little bit of plant science here. So the purpose of the flower is to produce a seed. So if you allow that flower to produce a seed, the plant will stop flowering. So in theory, what you want to do is deadhead them before they produce a seed so that your plant will keep producing flowers. So because I do that all day at my job, literally my thumbs turn green because I use my nail to pinch. And so my thumbs do turn green. So perhaps that's where it came from.
You're constantly getting filled up with chlorophyll.
Yep. All the time.
How do you get into the world of, are we calling it botany? Are we going to be specific
horticulture?
Like that? Horticulture?
Botany is good. Horticulture is a little different. It's more about the growing of the plants. And
It'd be a good name for a strip club, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Horticulture.
I'm sorry. There's somebody there who's like, well, I'm not listening anymore.
I like it. Horticulture. So I kind of fell into it. My mom had flower shops growing up, which is like cut flowers are different than necessarily growing plants. We always had a big, huge garden out at the farm, or my grandmother did. We had gardens in our backyard. And then when I moved down to Fargo, it was kind of like adrift. And so my friend was working at the nursery that I'm now employed at. And she was just like, just come. And I had done a few different things here in town, had done some children's theater, blah, 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 was waiting tables and just looking for something a little like additional income. And 8 years later, I'm still there. So that's
nice.
but it combines. So when I went to school, I studied theater performance and also design. And it combines a lot of my design eye with it. So not only do I get to be around plants all day, but I also get to like exercise that part of me that is looking at sculptural form and color. So and basically I tell people like what I do. My technical title is like custom container design manager. So a lot of the containers that you see downtown Fargo here, large scale stuff, that's what I do. I've done quite a few of them. So basically I get this pot of soil or fill a pot with soil, and then, the plants that I'm putting in them are maybe 3 to 6 inches tall when I'm planting it. And then it goes to the client's home or business. And I need to know what that plant is going to look like a month from now. And so I consider it almost like living sculpture.
Interesting.
So I kind of fell into it. And now I'm like, if I ever went back to school, that's what I would go back to school for, just to get that like title, that official title of horticulturist.
Do you ever find that people have favorite plants that they just like, I want you to include a lot of?
Yep.
I said marigolds already. I'm going to try and come up with another plant name. Petunias.
A lot of people say, I hate petunias. Do not put petunias in.
Really?
Because petunias are one that you really have to be at like very, very... You have to constantly deadhead petunias. Those are ones that you have to deadhead a lot. So a lot of times people want plants that you don't have to like tend to, you just have to make sure they're watered. So I get a lot of people that say, don't use petunias. It'll be like colors. They'll say like, I don't like pink, or I don't want any yellow. So those are things. And then a lot of times people, it's so funny at my job, like Mother's Day weekend is a huge weekend and people are...
Because that's when people say like I can plant.
I can plant, and it's usually Memorial Day weekend, Mother's Day weekend are really big ones, and it's crazy, JJ, crazy. So like one of the things that people are just like super into is sweet potato vine. So it's just this vine. It's pretty, it's green, whatever, but it's really prolific. So it gets really big, and people, it's like they need it. I've watched little old ladies. There's no more left on the shelf because we haven't been able to restock it, and little old ladies like surreptitiously walk by and yank it off of somebody else's cart. It's
Whoa.
Nuts. Yes, it's like a free for all. And then people will get super, super worked up and like get mad at me that we're out of something. And a lot of times I have to explain to people like, you're here on a Saturday and a Sunday. We still have 200,000 plants out at our farm, but they're not going to come in. I always tell people, if you want a quality greenhouse experience, go on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, because we've had a chance to restock and it's not crazy busy. And so anyway, so on a Saturday or Sunday, and there's, a couple hundred people in the store out in the greenhouses, and people just lose their shit. And I'm going, this should be fun. And if you get this angry about it, maybe you shouldn't have flowers. It's not like it's necessary, So it's, sweet potato vine, hot commodity.
My wife's father, loves it's almost like he hates being inside, loves being outside. And so he's got a greenhouse and he starts all of his plants.
That's awesome.
He's got a big garden and he's got all this stuff. And so he's passed that down to Jill. And so I built Jill a raised garden a few years ago, and she loves it. And she's really, really getting into all of these aspects. And I didn't realize how much science goes into some of this.
Yes.
So she was like, I want a blueberry bush, but we've got to go
acidify the soil.
Yeah, we've got to. And so she's like, so we got to put this in there.
And which is better in a raised bed because you can control the soil content and the pH of the soil. I always recommend people, because we are so alkaline here in the Red River Valley, that if you're going to attempt to grow blueberries, to do it in a raised bed where you have mixed the soil yourself, so it's acidified. There is a plant called a honeyberry.
Yep, super hardy for this area, right?
And it has a very similar flavor profile to a blueberry. Not exactly the same, but much less, babysitting with it. So it you can kind of plant it and forget it. And a lot of that, you talk about the science of things, and sometimes people don't understand, you have to have 2 blueberries, you have to have 2 honeyberries, you have to have 2 different, and these are different varietals. So you have to have a couple different types of an apple tree in order to get apples, because you need cross-pollination. So a lot of times people will come in and they'll say, well, I've had this, this apple tree for 7 years and it hasn't produced anything. And I go, well, are there any other apples around? Well, yeah, I planted 2. Well, did you do 2 of the same variety? Well, yeah. No,
like, no,
not how it works.
No. You got to get a Honey Crisp, and then you got to get a Pink
like
Lady.
Like a Harrison, or Pink Lady, yeah.
Have you tried the new, big in the apple world are the 2 new variants that came out from the University of Minnesota this last year?
Yeah, one of them, what are they? I think Pink Lady's one of them. That's not, I don't think that's on the market to buy the plant itself yet. Yeah.
So I was amazed by that. I went, first of all, like the fact that there is ownership, like we've got a copyright over this particular apple.
A lot, there are a lot of plants that if you look like annual plants, you'll look at the backside of the tag and it'll say propagation is prohibited. Now, your father-in-law, if he was propagating, like let's say a coleus or a petunia from vegetable cuttings, vegetative propagation, so you're doing it from a cutting, he probably wouldn't get in trouble. But now if we did it at our greenhouse and took 1 plant and turned it into 300 plants and we're selling it, we could get huge fines.
Interesting.
So they're all copyrighted. One of the things that I think people don't realize in Fargo is the NDSU has like a tree test area. What would it be, west of town? It's called Absaraka. And if you pay attention, it's open to the public. But that's where they are planting. So things that came out of there is the Fall Fiesta maple tree, the Lewis and Clark elm. And you can go out there and get a tour on the weekends that it's open to the public. And that's where they're testing. It's absolutely fascinating. Like they're planting different types of grapes, looking at different soil coverings, looking at one that's planted in basic soil, one that's planted in amended soil, and they'll walk you through and explain everything to you, and it's super fascinating.
What zone are we?
We're zone 4.
Zone 4. I'm amazed when people go out to Lowe's or Home Depot
Don't even get me started.
Buying all of these plants, and I look at the back of the tag and I'm like, that's a zone 2. That's not going to last.
Zone 2 would last here.
Oh, what zone 7 wouldn't last.
Yep. So if you're going to plant a tree, you would want to do, I even say with trees, zone 4 in a protected area, but zone 3 or 2 is better. The more cold hardy it is.
So the lower the zone, the more universal, or the just cold hardy?
Cold hardy. So start north, and that's like 0, 1, 2, all the way down to south. Now, there's also things like you couldn't plant let's say an elm tree that's a zone 2. You couldn't plant that in a zone 7 because it doesn't get cold enough for it, or a zone 12, probably closer. That's more equatorial. So it goes both ways, actually. So some plants need that dormancy, and if you don't let them go dormant, they won't come back for you.
Interesting. I definitely.
What's weed?
What's weed?
Yeah.
Like cannabis?
Yeah.
I would assume,
some other weed.
Well, I would assume that's probably more like a zone 12. It's tropical, equatorial.
I'm gonna write that down.
Well, you want to, but that's the thing too, is like with growing cannabis though, you have to have like such controlled environment in order to get a flower that's going to be any good.
I'm gonna write that down
so
too.
you like, well, I know people that
that's the whole trick.
have thrown like cannabis seeds, from their shake or whatever, have thrown it in ditches or in isolated areas, and maybe smokable, but it's not good. You know, like the good cannabis flower comes from a really controlled environment where they're pollinating things by hand. It's like super fascinating. I don't know a lot about the science of growing cannabis other than like what I've looked up online. I really wanted to try. I was down in Colorado a few years ago, and I really wanted to try to get in and get like a grower tour, but they don't let people in.
Yeah, it's pretty locked down.
Right. A lot of it's proprietary, right?
Exactly.
They're like, well, we don't want someone else getting our strain of, like
it's not
rusted car battery.
Yeah,
for
it's
them
not like
to...
going to
Mango
a
Kush.
brewery where you can get a tour, and that's what I was hoping to be able to and to see. I mean, to see how the science behind it, because the science really is fascinating.
Do you find a lot of people want plants but just don't know what they know that they want it, but they don't know anything about it?
Yes, I mean and then I have serious conversations with them about like how much work they actually want to put in. Is it a plant it and forget it plant? You know, let's say plant it and forget it plant, Russian sage, you know, or a blueberry, not a plant it and forget it plant, you know. So it just depends on how much you want to baby it. Do you want to cover it? Do you want to spend all your time outside? I mean, people will talk about how great my backyard looks. Well, literally, that's all I do in the summertime. You know, like I don't even want to go on vacation. It's easy to get somebody to watch my cat because the cat doesn't require as much care as like my garden does. You know, my kitty, she's just pet her and make sure she has water and feed her. But my plants, it's like, you know.
So if you were going to go somewhere for a week, whoever watches your house is really in for a dilly-dally of a time.
Yes.
Because they're out there weeding.
Well, they don't have to weed, but they just have to make sure stuff is watered. And it's like, and I've got a few people that I trust to come and check on my plants and my cat, you know, it's a twofer. It's not just my cat or just my plants. So
we ended up with some kind of a bug last year that just was the bane of Jill's existence. And
what did it look like?
Kind of like a potato bug, but it
had
wasn't
a stripe on the back. It's a four-striped garden beetle. That's literally what it's called. Yeah, they were really bad infestation around here last year.
And she did not. She was adamant about not using chemical pesticides.
Sure.
So all the time we were looking through all this stuff, and she's like, okay, so what she ended up doing was she ended up calling the NDSU's extension office.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a really good
right
resource.
on the same level.
Yep.
And they recommended planting a couple of particular types of plants amongst these other things that give off a scent or something that the bugs don't like. And so she tried that because it was late enough.
Do you remember what the plant was?
I don't.
So I'm not familiar with that.
Plants are green is all I know. And then there's another thing too with something about spearmint or something that kept away something.
Yeah, there's various, and I will always tell people like there are things like, you know, it gets tough. Okay, so for example, lemongrass and citronella plants, they will deter mosquitoes, but you have to activate the oils. Like you have to literally like move them so that, you know, and in my backyard, I'll take a citronella leaf and kind of crumble it and rub it on myself so that it, you know, keeps the mosquitoes away a little bit. There are natural pesticides that work really, really well. You know, for people that are doing organic gardening, there's pyrethrins are actually based on like a chrysanthemum. And maybe that's what I was wondering if maybe that's what they were telling her to plant is something in the mum family. But then there's this other thing called diatomaceous earth, which is like literally little like diatoms, like little tiny sea creatures all crushed up. And you find it in like toothpaste. Like but basically what happens to them is they crawl across it and it stabs into their exoskeleton and then they sort of bleed out, which is really satisfying when you're trying to treat something that is destroying your yard. You're like, yeah, fucker, die.
You suffer for this.
I have a hard time because people will say, well, you can pick slugs off your plants and then drop them in, you know, salty water. And I just have such a hard time with that. Ugh.
Well, yeah. I mean, like the slug didn't do anything to you, right?
Yeah.
Like
they're
it's
just
trying
living
to
their
do
life.
what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
There was we had friends who had raspberry bushes, and last year just like bugs overtook, and so they were like, oh, you got to put netting up or something.
Spotted Drosophila, which the problem with them is the bug itself isn't. It's a flying insect, but they lay their eggs, and then when you eat your raspberry, it's got little wormies in it. So things that you can do is hanging traps in your raspberries to catch the adults before. You can also use pyrethrin on that, but you have to get it on at the right stage, that's why it's hard to treat that, is because if you miss that window, you're effed. And honestly, it's just protein. Like, it's kind of disturbing, but like if you turned it into raspberry jam, you'd never know. Never know.
We've got rhubarb plants that are legacy rhubarb plants.
Okay.
Like one of them my grandmother started almost 60 years ago that comes back. And it gives off some of the best tasting rhubarb I've ever had in my life. And people who
Is
don't...
this the same grandma that gave a handy to Richard Nixon?
Yeah, this would be the same one.
That's so funny.
We don't actually know that she did, but I think she did.
Well, and just by you
This is
saying that, it
Tucker's
means that either we have to make sure that episode we recorded where you bring that up airs before this.
These will not be the only ones that I bring it up
Oh,
in.
okay.
If I say it enough, it'll become true.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll go down in the annals of history.
Listen to previous episodes of JJ Meets World.
Pat Nixon
So-
wouldn't do it for me.
And then we had some that were from our lake place. And one thing that I noticed about rhubarb is rhubarb plants are different. Like some of them produce the really thin stalks and
Thin
some of them
stalk,
have the
really
thicker
broad.
stalk.
Yep.
And I love rhubarb because it grows so fast and it's a big, green, beautiful plant. And it almost takes nothing. All you got to do is pick it and then you're good to go. And then it's like, see you later, rhubarb. Do you enjoy rhubarb?
Can't stand it.
Interesting.
She's been biting her tongue this whole
Yeah,
time.
she's been like,
I think
rhubarb's
the plant itself
disgusting.
is really pretty. And honestly, I'm one of those weird people that kind of like, I have this thing with food that like sometimes like really strong flavors, like I don't like them, but I keep going back for more. Like a spicy mango pickle at an Indian restaurant. I'm like, oh, it's so weird. Just another bite. Oh, it's just so strange. It's like when there's a terrible smell, but you keep going back for it. And
Or you
rhubarb
tell
is one
other
of the
people,
yeah,
like, smell this,
this
smell
smells
this.
terrible. Smell this. And rhubarb is one of those things where it's like I would, if somebody handed me a stalk of rhubarb, I probably would eat it. But it's just like I'm not going to gravitate toward like the rhubarb crumble at the Lutheran basement.
That seems
or whatever.
super backwards to me.
I know.
Like I would go for the cooked pastry versus just raw stick of rhubarb.
I mean, but I would eat the rhubarb crumble too. Like I'm not gonna, but it's just not, I haven't planted it. Although the plant is really pretty.
is it the same family as celery?
Nope, not in the same family as celery. It's a dock. I think it's in the dock family, which like burdock is.
Oh, I hate burdock.
Yeah. Like,
In fact, one time.
but that plant's pretty too until it produces all the burrs.
Right. My father-in-law was like, could I get a cut of your rhubarb? Could you split your rhubarb? And I'm like, sure. And so I was like, I'll just go find the shitty rhubarb that would like grows
wasn't
behind.
rhubarb?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't. And he grew it for like 3 weeks before he's like, this
Yeah.
isn't rhubarb. And I'm like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And my understanding is you can eat burdock, but you're not going to like it.
Yeah, I think it's. I've done a little bit of research. I think it's something where you want to dig up the root and eat that part of it. I think it's medicinal. There's a lot of stuff that's around that's kind of used for medicinal purposes.
I think it's funny because there's burdock and then there's Birch Burdick, who's our state attorney. Wonder if those guys ever get confused.
Yeah.
You're
Now
like,
I'm just
oh,
envisioning a dick covered in burrs. Like,
Do you have a favorite tree?
cottonwood. Just because I'm from the central part of the state,
Yep.
and I call them grandfather cottonwoods. Like the cottonwoods are around there are as broad as this table, so about 5 feet across. Just gorgeous. I love the sound of cottonwood leaves. I love the smell of cottonwood leaves in the fall. The foliage is really silvery, and it sounds like water when the breeze blows through them. The really mature ones, the bark is like craggy, like rocks, like you could climb up it. I have one tattoo, and it's of a cottonwood leaf.
Interesting. Are you sick and tired of Lewis and Clark? Being that you're from that area,
Okay, so
that area.
You want to hear? Okay, so my parents kind of, well, not even kind of. My
Tell me
parents were
your
hippies.
great grandmother gave
No, so
Lewis or Clark a hand job.
No, so
handy.
what's really handy? So what's really funny about this is, so in 2003 was the bicentennial, or else it was 3-4. I can't remember. So my parents were canoe racers when they first got hitched, right? Like literally that's what they did, like right after they got married, is they like in their bridal gear, like did a canoe run, So my dad, because we have this family farm, 500 acres, we rent out land that gets farmed and pasture land, but dad kind of wanted something to do to keep it in the family, make a little bit of money, pay the taxes on it, et cetera, et cetera. So he gets it into his head to buy these. They're 26 foot long, birch bark replica, like Voyager canoes. They seat like 14 people. They look like Viking ships. We got one of those to start with and 3 teepees, Chippewa teepees, 17 pole teepees, right? Okay, no, I'm serious. This is just like, I'm glad you brought up Lewis and Clark. So we, for almost a decade, had a business where we would get dressed up in like Lewis and Clark gear and give people tours in these big fucking canoes. And we would stay in teepees and like, you know, cook buffalo over a fire. My cousins, we would laugh because it's like, time to get on your period clothes. But it was called, I mean, and we were in
so would like the bus full of old people from New Rockford like hobble out and they're like, this is the tour?
We were in National Geographic magazine.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Minnesota Public Radio did a couple things on us. North Dakota Tourism loved us. And so eventually we expanded to 2 of the big fucking boats and then 1 smaller one. And the biggest one was Bird Woman, and then there was the Janie, and then there was the Bird Woman 2. Bird Woman is Secaucus name translated to. I think there are 2 theories. It's either Bird Woman or Boat Launcher.
Anyways, Janie?
Janie is what Lewis and Clark called Secaucus.
Really?
So that was why the little boat was the Janie. So we were Bird Woman, Missouri River Adventures, and so because Washburn is right by Fort Mandan where the replica is.
I'm very familiar with Washburn. I have a lot of family there. That's where my grandmother, who gave the handy, apparently, according to Tucker, is from.
She did it in Washburn?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was in South Fargo.
It was in Fargo.
It was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting.
So you guys know Clay Jenkinson, right?
Yeah.
You know who he is. Okay. So he did... So just upriver from our property is where there's a monument where they think the fort actually was, but Clay Jenkinson, according to the journals, and his theory is that the actual fort was much closer to like where our family farm is. So that's the story about Clay Jenkinson.
JJ, were you Lewis or Clark?
Okay, so which is the one who committed suicide?
Meriwether Lewis.
Okay, I was Clark.
Okay.
One of my first acting jobs was a buddy of mine and I were asked to play Lewis and Clark at Lewis and Clark's Lewis and Clark Days.
Okay.
My understanding was we just needed to put on the costumes and stand behind the mayor while he gave a speech.
Where was this at?
This is at Lewis and Clark Elementary.
Okay.
And so they're
So I was like, there's Lewis and Clark Days in my hometown. I was like, were you?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, not that. And then you'll find out why in a moment.
I used to watch Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman.
I like that
That's my
show
connection
too, yeah.
to this.
I
discussion.
never even. That's
Dean
probably what that
Cain.
title is a play off of. Do you think?
I don't know, but
Well,
I kept,
yeah. I mean,
must have
Lois
been.
and Clark, Lewis. I bet
wonder
you
if
it was.
the original. I mean, like if that was part of the reason why I don't know who wrote the original Superman comic, but I wonder if that was intentional.
Siegel and Shuster. No, I don't think at the time it was, but I'm not positive. Anyway, sorry, JJ.
So I wasn't supposed to just stand behind the mayor. The fire department was there, and then the police department, and like 4 other things. And they're like, you're going to have 20 kids for 10 minutes, and then they're going to keep going through the stations.
Yep.
And so 250 elementary school kids who had been studying Lewis and Clark for the better part of a month are
So were
coming
they
through.
asking you questions
They're
you
asking me
didn't know the
questions.
answers
Yeah.
to? Yeah.
And like, so for example, they're like, what were your parents' names? Mr. and Mrs. Clark. And so I'd open it up and be like, how many of you walk home from school? And then they'd raise their hand and be like, imagine none of this was here. And it was the most BS that I've ever. I'm trying to think. Those kids now would be
That's crazy.
like just graduating from college.
Yep. Isn't that just nuts when you think about that? Like I used to do a lot of work with FMCT in town, and like, yeah, those kids are like in their mid-20s. Like it's just like, what?
Yeah, I don't like thinking about that, but yeah, my little brother is 21, and it's just like, no, no, you're not.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're gonna get older. That's just what.
No, I'm
It's
not.
inevitable.
But
I'm gonna upload my
when
brain to
other
the
people
computer.
get older around you, that's unfortunate.
That is.
And if only we could just stop time, like a snow globe.
If I could turn back time.
Do you know what her last #1 hit was, Cher?
No.
If you could believe in life
That was
after
my
love.
guess. Yeah, I love that song.
I'm a big fan of Cher.
Okay.
Like from her old stuff. Like I thought Cher was
Wanna do
just
karaoke sometime?
foxy. Do you do love?
I love.
what's your go-to Cher song?
probably If I Could Turn
Oh,
Back
really?
Time. Yeah.
See, I'm Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves.
Oh, that's a good one, too.
Born in the wagon of a traveling show. My mama had to dance for the money they'd throw. Love that.
This is
stuff.
why he's the host.
Yep. What other go-to karaoke do you have?
My number one go-to karaoke is Mr. Roboto by Styx.
Oh,
That's a really good choice.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a showstopper.
Do you even do like the Oh, okay. You even know where I'm going for on that one.
It, yeah. And then I do Janis Joplin, Me and Bobby McGee, and the other one, of course, Four Non Blondes, What's Up, and then anything Patsy Cline. Walking After Midnight, love Patsy Cline.
Really?
But yeah, but Mr. Roboto sticks because it's kind of got that operatic thing to it, and it's a sci-fi song.
I open up and look for television theme songs.
Oh, that's annoying.
Brady Bunch, that's a
Cheers.
crowd, that's
Do you
a
do the
crowd
Cheers
killer.
theme?
I don't do the Cheers
You
theme
should.
because it's cliche and overdone.
Is it?
If I'm going to do something,
I've never heard anybody
it's just
do the
like I
Cheers
can't
theme.
do the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air anymore either because it's overdone.
Yeah.
It makes sense to do the Cheers theme in a bar.
Nope.
All right. I'm wrong, I guess.
Nope. Just sort of like,
I don't like to karaoke.
why not?
Don't want
Do
to.
you know what karaoke means?
Don't care.
It's Japanese for empty orchestra.
Don't need to know that. Don't want
Did
to
not
know
know that.
about it. I actually had an uncle who, until he passed away a couple years ago, and he was this basically like a vice president guy at like a insurance company, really wealthy, buttoned up
Is that what his
guy.
his nameplate said? Vice president guy?
Yeah, something like that. And my uncle John, but his secret love was karaoke, and he would always, whenever he'd go on work trips, he would scout out and figure out where karaoke was, wherever he was staying.
Yeah.
And that's what he would do. He would just go freaking nuts for karaoke.
It's really fun to do karaoke in like small town bars. Oh my gosh. When I was part of Northern Prairie Performing Arts out of FMCT, we would put on these like kids plays in like ridiculously small towns, like, 500 people. And we would stay in the nearest town that had a hotel. And we would do that. We would seek out the karaoke in the small towns. And there would be, 5 of us that roll in, big city kids, and just dominate, because we're theater assholes. So we like, look at me, I can sing.
Karaoke hasn't been fun ever since those big city theater kids started coming in here.
Golly.
She sure does have a pretty mouth.
Boy, if I was marrying my cousin, I would definitely go after her.
You ever
that
done
was
it on
really-
a tractor?
I went to
Phaedra's thinking about it, actually.
No, I have not.
I went to Edinburgh, Scotland years ago with my
Yeah,
sister on
yeah.
a trip. We did
Theater
like
trip?
no, just we went to London, and then we had a friend who was studying abroad, previous guest on the podcast, Rachel Hoffman, and then we met up with our friend Sean. Now Sean and I used to do a 2-person duet act when we did karaoke.
Okay.
We did Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard
love
Light.
that song. Love that song.
And it's a great one at karaoke too because it's 8 minutes long. So
Yep.
you're going to
Just
dominate for a while.
Revel in it.
And we did it 5 or 6 times here, and we would sign up as Shawnee and the Dragon. And so they'd be like, next up, Shawnee and the Dragon. So the first night we're in Scotland, we've had a lot to drink, and we go to this little tiny place called the Three Sisters.
Okay.
And they're doing karaoke, and we're like, oh, and it's an old castle. Like, it's an armament part of a castle. And so we're like, oh, we'll do that. And so we hop up there, and we do our Shawnee and the Dragon thing. For the next 3 days, we kept getting recognized at
Shawnee
places.
and the Dragon? That's
yeah,
so
and I was
awesome.
like, well, our act is international. This is great.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But we haven't done it since.
Got to
like
bring
you
it back.
put it, you retired it after
Yeah,
that trip.
we
That's
did.
actually that's perfect. That's like you put it to bed after that.
Yeah. Sean is one of those wonderful people that after he's had a little bit to drink, you pick the song for him, and then he'll go up there and sing it. He used to do this one at Reuters where he'd sing Elton John's I Want to Kiss the Bride, and he'd like, I want to kiss the bride. Yeah. And he'd kick his leg really high. It was always a delight to watch.
That can backfire though when you pick like because I've done that game where it's like get enough cocktails in you and you're choosing songs for other people, and that happened. You know that song Maps. Pack maps. Wait. So I chose that that song for my friend Amanda, and she's going Ma P.S. Ma P.S. because she didn't know the song at all. And so I still just like look at her and be like Ma P.S.
I remember my older stepsister's wedding, and me and my stepbrother and my little sister wanting to do The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And we just would go, a weem away.
Do you know the story of that song?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I want to hear the story.
Okay.
I was done.
I love that song. But that is, so I think it's a Kenyan, or else, might be wrong, South African. There's a documentary about it. I think it was a South African gentleman, if I remember correctly. And he wrote the song and then recorded it. And this is back in, what would it be, like the 60s? What's the name of the band that did the cover? Like the three white guys that made that song
I don't
famous.
know.
If I could, the Kingsmen? The Kings?
I think that's right.
Yeah. So somebody got a recording of this guy in South Africa doing The Lion Sleeps Tonight, and then some bigwig, and then the Kingsmen recorded it and made all this money, and they were never, the original artist was never ever compensated for that, and like ended up dying in a hovel from AIDS. I mean, it's just awful.
Ugh.
And they're never, and they go through and they try to track, who lied basically at whatever point. So again, there's a documentary about it.
So
Can't
when
remember the
Timon
name,
and
but
Pumbaa sing it.
Yeah, right.
That guy didn't get anything for
at
it.
all. And his kids live in a hovel too. I mean, it's just really, really, really dark.
Have you ever seen the documentary about the 20 years or 30 years later from Paul Simon recording the album Graceland?
No.
So Paul Simon goes to South Africa to record Graceland, and it's during the time of the apartheid. And so he's like, I'm going to work with these amazing musicians, and I'm going to show the world that, this is happening. And so he goes and he records that album. Those guys don't get paid a dime from it. Now, Paul Simon doesn't know that they're getting completely screwed out of all this. So 30 years later, he kind of gets wind that none of these guys ever gets paid. And so he goes back. And so they have a documentary about making the album Graceland, and then a 30-year follow-up of him going back to check out what's going on. And a lot of these guys are living in dirt huts. Yeah. And, here they are on, You Can Call Me Al is one of the most played songs of all time. And he finds out that they just didn't get any royalties, period. And some of them are pretty pissed off. And I would be pissed off too. And I think that happens a lot, more than we give it credit for. And all of those amazing studio musicians who are paid just for a day rate.
Yeah.
And they're brought in and they end up recording one of the most famous songs of all time. And they're like, okay, bye-bye.
Well, one of what is her last name? Four Non-Blondes, Linda Perry. The Four Non-Blondes, What's Up, 25 Years in My Life is Still. She she obviously gets compensated, but she's got all these writing credits. She basically wrote all of Pink's first album. Yeah, it's super fascinating. So people think that she's a one-hit wonder, and it's no, that woman's got bank. There's another really good documentary. I can't remember how I stumbled across it, but it's Searching for Sugar Man.
Yeah.
Cecil Rodriguez. That album, that's Cold Fact. That's a good album too, but that's absolutely a fascinating documentary. I mean, what did they finally found him? He was equal to the fame of Simon and Garfunkel, but in South Africa. And then they finally find him, and he's a janitor in Detroit. Yeah. Just so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
The things like that too, songwriting credits have broken up bands before. I mean, that certainly led to the Smashing Pumpkins breaking up because Corgan didn't want to share any credits with the other band members, and therefore they didn't make nearly as much money as he did.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up leading towards a lot of the dissent inside the band, is what Robbie Robertson got himself put down as the songwriter because he was doing a lot of the lyrics.
Yeah.
But the songwriting was happening as a group, and he ended up getting way more money than any of them did, and then ends up being the one that wants to quit. And these guys are like, listen, this is how we make our money. You're able to retire right now because you got yourself listed as that when you shouldn't have. And for the band fans like me, it's still a sticking point. How are you still the only one who's alive? You and Garth Hudson, asshole. That's right, Robbie Robertson. Don't even try to come on JJ Meets World podcast. No, you are not welcome here.
If you want it, that's all right. We'll do it.
Unless you get Garth Hudson to come with.
You can be my guest producer for the day. I'm not turning down any guests on JJ Meets World, which is why our upcoming guest is going to be a trash can.
After that, it's a Grand Wizard of the KKK, and then...
Oh.
Remember? You asked about him to come in.
I thought we were interviewing a wizard.
No.
Yeah, a little different.
Right.
Slightly not Gandalf.
Well, I got to throw out my questions that I wrote down. Well, actually, some of these are still. Do you believe in magic?
Do I believe in magic?
Yeah,
I try to think of the tune of the song. Do I believe, is this a legit question?
Yeah.
Do I believe in yes, I guess is probably the short answer. I believe in some type of power that we haven't harnessed in some way, shape, or form.
So like spells. Do you believe in spells?
I feel like that's probably and I'm not one of those people, but I feel like some of that's just people manifesting positive thoughts. You know,
she likes
mantras.
sci-fi, not fantasy.
Which I actually get. Oh, people are like, well, do you like Star Trek? Or the other one that gets me is Star Wars. No, Star Wars is not sci-fi. It is space fantasy. There's no fucking science in Star Wars. Don't get me started.
I'm gonna play this
explosions in space, you idiot.
Midichlorians, that's like getting a letter from Hogwarts. Although I do love Harry Potter, but anyway, so I do believe in magic. But it's spells and stuff. It's again, I just think that's manifesting. Whatever.
Do you like sci-fi futurism or sci-fi in general?
Oh,
because so much of what is sci-fi considered is futurism as well.
Yeah,
space and what will happen.
I tend to gravitate toward more positive, space sci-fi. So Isaac Asimov.
So you do like Star Trek? Don't you look at me and say that Star Trek isn't sci-fi? I will kick you the fuck out of this room.
There's no real science in Star Trek.
Oh my God.
Warp drive, that's not science. There's no science behind it. There's nobody
science
explaining how it works. It's still just absolute.
They explain how it's not working quite a bit, though.
No, it's the same thing. It's there's nobody talking about. No, I can't think of any of the actual sci-fi like engines of space that are real.
Antimatter is real.
Antimatter is real.
Antimatter engine that they're using.
Okay.
Warp drive is probably the only way we could travel across the galaxy, because that's the only way you can go faster than the speed of light is if you warp the space-time continuum. But they also, but sci-fi.
But they don't explain any of that.
But good sci-fi isn't about explaining; it's about raising questions.
Yeah,
it's about exploring the human condition through fantastical ways, and it's got a base in reality.
Yes,
right?
I mean, so I guess what I would say is I prefer more hard sci-fi, where they're explaining.
There you go.
The theories behind things.
Right.
And again, I can't believe I can't
Back
think
to the Future.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you on the whole space fantasy Star Wars thing, because that is not raising any questions. That's swords, good and evil. That's what that is.
I mean, it's a good story. I'm not saying it's not a good story, but I don't. Yes,
it's a Western.
Yeah, but I don't think it's sci-fi. I mean, it's a Western in space, which is badass. I'm not saying it's not good, but it's not sci-fi.
Right.
But I like I tend to gravitate more toward positive sci-fi, but then there's some really great sci-fi out there that's dystopic and really depressing.
Why is the future always sad?
And it's the Wind-Up Girl, and it's post-apocalyptic. We've run out of everything, and it's just bad, and it's interesting, but man, it's depressing.
Did you ever read Seven Eves?
No.
Oh my God!
But I did read.
Phaidra.
What was the one that you really liked that you recommended to me? And all of a sudden, Necromancer. What's his name?
Cryptonomicon. Neil Stephenson.
Yeah. No.
Necromancer.
I'm gapping on it. Anyway, you recommended an author to me, and I picked up a couple of his books. And I really liked them.
Double check it, but if it was Neil Stephenson, he did Seven Eves, and that is phenomenal.
And that's an author that I continually hear about on the sci-fi subreddit, and I still haven't picked up anything of his. Neil Stephenson. I'll have to check it out.
I bet that's who it was that we were talking about, but because he's got a book called The Cryptonomicon, which can be easy to say Necronomicon because it's got the same thing
Google
to
it.
it. But we'll have to figure it out.
Have you ever seen the show Party Down?
No.
So Party Down is a great television series. It was on Showtime. No, it was on Stars, excuse me. About people living in LA, but they all work for the same catering company. So every episode,
totally have seen a couple episodes.
Okay,
of that.
yeah. So every episode takes place at somewhere they're catering. Martin Starr from Freaks and Geeks, one of my all-time favorite shows, is in it, and he plays a character who is an aspiring screenwriter, but he likes hard sci-fi. I thought that was a joke term that they made up, and you just used it on this podcast. So the term hard sci-fi
that's an actual term.
is real, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not enough for nerds to have one genre of something. We need to have 20, because then there's the divisions of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So people will try to classify steampunk in the same genre. It's like, no, it's not.
Yep.
Then there's cyberpunk, which is not necessarily sci-fi. It's futurism for sure. And then there's hard fantasy as well, fantasy and hard fantasy. So hard fantasy, I believe, would be like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. And I think light is like Harry Potter.
Or like Pierce Anthony Xanth novels.
Right.
Like that just kind of pulp BS. Yeah.
So
Although
where would the Kingdom Keepers
I
fall
actually don't
into
know
there?
what that one is.
Kingdom
I don't know
Keepers
that
is
either.
a young adult series where everything in Disney World comes to life
It's
at night.
light. It would be light
Night at
fantasy.
the
So it's
Museum,
holding,
yeah.
it's holding, like all those villains are real.
Yeah.
And it's about the 3 kids who have to make sure that they
It's
keep
like
the
the
keys to the
mixed-up files
kingdom.
of Miss Basil E. Frankenweiler. Like,
Yes.
people forget about those books. Like, I'm just like, Newbery Award-winning book. Like, you don't remember that?
It's bothering me that I can't think
The
of who I recommend it
Newbery
to now.
Awards.
It's Will. It's Necromancer. I know it is. But
Side note.
You mean Neuromancer by William Gibson?
Neuromancer. Yes,
but I never
that's-
read that book.
No, but you read another one by him. Neuromancer. That's what I was thinking of.
By William Gibson.
But there was one that was, I feel like it's got a girl's name in it or something. I can't remember.
Okay.
But he's good too. But that's dystopic. I mean, like, I consider like that's dark too.
Neuromancer. Huh. I'm not sure. I'll have to keep digging. Not finding it. Well, JJ and I
I'm
are
one
now
of those
both on our
people though,
phones.
like unless I read so many books that unless I have read them more than once, they don't store in my head.
Okay.
Like it's like I have to read things more than once and then they store in my head.
Kristen Wiig, I think, should play the live action Amelia Bedelia in a live action Amelia Bedelia movie. You guys familiar with her?
Isn't she a little like? Isn't Amelia Bedelia like a little girl?
No, she's like the maid nanny.
Oh,
And she takes things literally. So they're like, all right, Amelia, you need to give the baby a mashed banana. And she's like, okay. And so she just like pounds a banana that's still in its peel.
Yeah.
And then just gives it to the baby. And so, like, I mean, she's functionally illiterate, is what she is, basically. But,
Amelia Bedelia.
yeah. And there's families like,
silly.
oh, we're employing this woman.
Kitty
She's
named
watching her
Amelia,
offspring.
and I call her Amelia Bedelia all the time. But I didn't actually know what the background of
Yeah,
the,
I don't think
the
I'm
name
familiar
was.
with those.
Oh, yeah, she wears like a bonnet.
I vaguely recollect it, but like
I'm also so there was a book that was out of print when I was in elementary school that my librarian let me take out.
Did you return it?
I did. Oh, I did. Because she goes, you need to actually bring this back every day to show me that you are holding on to it.
Yeah.
And I had to go after school for the first 3 days to just read it in the library until she trusted me. But it was about a fanciful caretaker of these children named Mr. Pudgeons. And they've now reprinted the book. So screw you, lady. I can now buy a copy on Amazon anytime I want. But that was a book I read that, you know, when you read a book and it makes such an impression on you that even 30 years later, you're still thinking about it.
Yeah.
Mr. Pudgeons, so he's this this fat old dude that the family's like, can you watch our children? Yeah, I'll watch our children for you. Kind of like a Winston Churchill almost. But he used to have he didn't have a cane. He had an umbrella. And so he would do things like tap stuff with his umbrella while he's smoking this giant cigar. And so he tapped their pipes with his umbrella. And then when they would turn on the faucets, it'd be different flavors of pop. And so they'd be like, the bathtub's filling up with root beer. It's cherry cola in the basement. And
He's eternal like Mary Poppins is, right?
I assume so.
Like he's a creature from a different dimension or something. Okay.
I don't think he's probably from another dimension.
Oh, is
I
that
think
too
he's from-
far-fetched?
I think he's
Is that
from
a little too far-fetched.
I think
the
he's
story
from,
about the guy who-
sci-fi
I think he's
for you.
from
Yeah.
imagination. And that's why he's eternal. It's
All I
'cause
know
he
is that
exists
Mary
in
Poppins comes from heaven.
It's not true at
She
all.
always descends from the clouds.
Also, here's an unpopular opinion, for me at least. The new Mary Poppins sucked.
Did
I
it?
didn't see it.
They played it so
I
safe.
love her, but I
Oh,
didn't see
no.
it.
So
Really?
that's the problem. Is
Shoot.
so I thought, well, Emily Blunt will do great in this,
Yeah.
right?
Well, the
She
I
made
trailer
love
Mary-
looks
her.
great.
She made Mary Poppins so unlikable. She made her a real bitch. And Mary Poppins always kind of had this kind of sternness
Yeah,
to her,
she was
Right.
but there
kind
was
of
also a
strict.
sweetness at the same time.
Right.
And they make her they make her kind of hipstery in the way that she's like, oh, you don't know about this, you fool.
Just judgy Mary Poppins.
She
They
is.
should have gone way against type and done John C. Reilly or something as Mary Poppins.
I heard that movie was terrible.
The-
Will
the-
Ferrell and John C. Reilly.
Sherlock.
See, here's the
Yeah.
thing. So I'm going to tell you something.
Preach.
I went to Holmes and Watson.
Yeah.
Because 5% on Rotten Tomatoes, they're saying people are walking out of this thing. So like, I'm gonna check this out because I liked Step Brothers and I liked Talladega Nights. They must have done something to a critics association that pissed them off because the movie is not nearly as bad as what like Entertainment Weekly and the Associated Press painted it out to be. Is this movie good? No. But it is not the worst movie of the year.
Yeah.
I thought like Welcome to Marwen was the worst movie of 2018.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
And that one had all the love dripping all over from the makers of Forrest Gump.
Yeah, Robert Zemeckis doesn't necessarily, I don't know. Like,
What happened to him? Because he lost his touch.
Yeah.
He
I think
got
so,
all
too.
into that capture stuff for a bit.
motion
The
capture?
motion capture stuff that looked really bad.
Yeah.
With
I've
Tom
only
Hanks.
ever walked out on one movie because I can pretty much sit through anything, but it was Wild Wild West.
Yeah, I actually have a soft spot in my
No,
heart
and
for that
I think
movie.
now I have a soft spot for it, but at the
JJ's
time
pretty
I was
upset
just
right
like,
now.
drivel. You know, I was like early 20s and I was like, you know, going to like, you know, indie films and just being really important about, you know, film and, you know, Wild Wild West garbage. And now I watch it and I'm
Fuck
like,
you,
giant
Kenneth
robot.
Branagh.
Yeah, like giant robot spiders. That's hilarious.
I've got a soft spot for Wild Wild
Yeah, me
West
too.
as well.
Like I said, but that's the only movie I've ever walked
Jim
out
West,
in the theater.
Desperado, Rough Rider.
No, you don't want nada. None of this.
Six gunning this brother, running this funky old soldier.
Look,
just like I told you. That's as far as
You'd be out of that dress when you meet Jim West.
Damsel in distress. Be out of that dress when she meets Jim West. That's right.
Oh wow!
Why did Will
smell
Smith?
the testosterone in here?
Oh, is that testosterone that we're smelling? I mean, I farted, but that was about it.
I actually quote Wild Wild West probably once a week when I'm doing something that I don't think I've got the wherewithal to do, and I need to pump myself up. I think of Kenneth Branagh and his little tiny electric wheelchair with spider legs, and Will Smith is holding on, and he's holding on to Kenneth Branagh, and they're over the edge of this cliff. And he goes, "You just don't have it in you, do ya, boy?" And then he like lets him go over the edge of this cliff,
And that's your like power statement.
and I'm like, I do have this in me. I have
it in
Jim
me,
West.
boy.
I've only walked out of one movie in the theaters, and it was Malibu's Most Wanted. I won tickets
I've
to
never
it.
even heard of that.
It's got Jamie
Kennedy.
and
That's right.
he's like a white guy who pretends he's from the hood, and his dad hires Taye Diggs and Anthony Anderson to pretend to be real like gang members to kidnap him and kind of scare him straight. It is atrocious. And I won tickets to it off the radio, and when I'm walking out of it with my group, one of our group members turned around to a theater full of people and goes, "What are you people still doing here?" And then it got applause.
I remember Spider-Man 3 and Dustin Buchanan taking his Spider-Man shirt off at the end of the movie and throwing it onto the ground, and then he just left it
Done
there.
with it.
Yeah.
Done with
He
it.
just left
Sweep
it
this
there.
up with a popcorn and the spilled Coca-Cola.
So let's go back to one thing real quick. So you've got a degree in theater.
No,
No.
didn't finish.
You didn't finish. You were working towards a degree in theater, and you love plants.
Yeah.
Is your dream to do Little Shop of Horrors?
I love that play.
Me
I
too.
love that play. No, my dream would be to be Hedwig in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. But I've done. I've never been in Little Shop of Horrors, but I've done costumes for it, I think like twice now.
So there's a line when they're when they're really busy, and she says, I always remember her going like, "Hollyhocks are hardier. Which
Yep.
one would your wife prefer?"
Yep.
And
I
saw
didn't get all those
Hollyhocks.
references until like the last time I saw it. I was like, oh, I know
Oh,
all
nice.
these plants now. Yeah, it's funny.
Do you know how Little Shop of Horrors came to be? Have you ever heard that story?
Yeah, there was like an original black and white film,
With-
correct?
Jack Nicholson.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. So, an owner of a studio and a director had a bet that this director couldn't make a movie in a weekend. And the director was like, "I can make a movie in a weekend." And he goes, "Okay, go this weekend. You got to make a movie." And so the plant store set was up from another movie. And so he and his screenwriting partner saw it on a Thursday, and they wrote the script like overnight for this concept of like a killer plant that comes to life. They cobbled together this killer plant by literally like stapling other plants outside of like another piece. And they made a movie in a weekend.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then that became part of like Hollywood lore. And then, of course, Alan Menken and Howard Ashman turn it into the Broadway show. Broadway show turns into a movie. It's a revival. Then there's the animated series.
There's an animated. Whoa! You just like triggered something in the back of my head. Like that's great. There's an yes,
Phaedra's
there is.
I know what I'm doing tonight.
YouTube spiral.
Do you remember back in the day when there's an animated series for everything? They're like, "What's a popular movie?"
Killer
like
Tomatoes.
Yep.
Yeah. Like there's these. This is going back to like movies and things. There's this image from an animated series that I have in my head, and I have tried to find what this animated series is, and I feel like it was something like about, it was maybe called The Flip Side or something. And what I can remember, and the only person that has ever said like, yeah, I can kind of recollect that, is my sister. And the opening credits are like these kids running on a giant record in a jukebox, and that's all I can remember. And it was like there was a bad guy, and I'm sure it was like some like short-lived, one summer cartoon on a Saturday morning, and really bad animation, but it's just, I can't find it. And I mean, like, I have looked and looked and looked and looked, and Tucker's gonna find it in 2 seconds. And
I had been dying to try and find a series that I watched on Nickelodeon when I was a kid, and recently this last year I found it. I was like, it's about a mannequin who comes to life all at night, and there's like a puppet security guard, and then there's the woman who runs the store, and then there's a mouse who talks. And I was looking everywhere.
Wasn't that on PBS?
So I watched it on Nickelodeon. It was a Canadian series for children, and so the CBC sold it to like all these different entities. So you probably saw it on PBS.
And that mouse was weird looking, right? And it was a female, wasn't it? A female mouse?
And it had a little tiny like squeaky voice. It's called Today's Special.
Oh,
and
totally remember that one.
And there's the reason the mannequin comes to life is he's wearing a special hat that a magician had like blessed is the wrong word, but put a spell on. And then you had to say the magic words hocus pocus alamagokus.
Oh! Was it kid video?
I don't think so. Again, all I have is that image from the opening credits. Like, I don't remember anything else about it. But
do you believe in magic hats?
No. I mean, I believe in the power of a really good hat to finish an outfit. So if that's magic, then sure.
Okay, why not? Well, we've eaten up over an hour of your time, so let's bring it on down to this. Tell me a plant that people should be putting in their garden or at their lake home that people just aren't giving enough credit to.
Well, what I would say, what people should be putting...
Other than sweet potato vine.
Yeah, well, sweet potato vine is an annual. What people should be planting in their yards at their lake homes are plants that are native plants or close to native plants, because our pollinators are in dire straits. Like, that's number one. People need to start paying attention to this. And it's...
I keep bees.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
I have 30 pounds of honey, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with all of it.
But that's what I would say to people is like to... plants that pollinators bring back the habitat, because like we're kind of in concrete wastelands, even in Fargo, there's not a lot of habitat. Something that does, I'm trying to think of like things that don't get enough credit as far as plants go. It's weird because my brain isn't in summer mode right now. My brain's in houseplant mode. That happens to me because in the wintertime, my brain goes into houseplant mode, and in the summertime, it goes into summer.
I found out that for Christmas cactuses, if you want them to bloom, you need to actually put them near a window and stress the plant.
Yep. Blooming is usually like, I need to reproduce because I'm going to die. Yeah.
My wife had a Christmas cactus from her grandmother that we figured the original plant that this thing came from is like 120 years old.
Yeah, that's why plants are awesome.
They are awesome, right? And the clipping that she got is a clipping that her grandmother gave her mother, and her mother clipped from that plant to give to her. So she had this forever, and it was a beautiful plant, and it sat on top of this hutch, and she was like, it's just never bloomed. It never blooms. It never blooms. Well, then one year we moved that hutch because we were painting, and it was by the window. And so
I bet it also got a little colder, too. Temperature is a big thing with Christmas cactus.
So, like that near the window, that cooler temperature hit it. And I heard people also saying you can put it into like a closet where it's dark all the time.
So what you do is you kind of trick it into going dormant for a bit and then wake it up.
So that's interesting.
We have a story that we tell at my work where this woman brought in a Hoya, And I mean, she was probably, well, long story short, the Hoya, which is a vining houseplant, came from an original plant that her grandmother had smuggled 5 Hoya leaves in her girdle through customs at Ellis Island.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So it's like, and then everybody, kind of the same thing as your grandmother-in-law's plant. So everybody in the family had a cutting from it, which is just super cool.
That's awesome.
And I have plants that are older than me, like that were my grandmother's. And so people think about that and they think that house plants are short-lived. And it's like, well, if you don't kill it, most of them are going to live to be like 30 years old, if not more, if you don't kill it. So
I wanted to have a Venus flytrap as a kid.
garbage.
Really? Just bad?
I mean, they're super cool, but they're really hard to take care of. So you basically have to have like a terrarium set aside for it and really control the environment.
Why?
Do you know the only place that they grow in the wild is in North Carolina? That's it.
What?
I know. North Carolina. That's where
Weird.
Venus flytrap's from. You think it's like some like, no, it's bogs in North Carolina.
Can plants sometimes be like fish where if they have room to get bigger, they'll get bigger? Or, you know, like how if you take an Oscar and you put it in a 20-gallon tank, it'll get to a certain size. But then if you take it after 5 years and put it in a 50-gallon tank, it can actually get bigger.
They're going to, it's no is the short answer, but a lot of times people will come in and people will be like, this plant has just gotten too big for my home. And I'm like, well, you can cut it up and propagate it and have some smaller plants. But at a certain point, your plant's just going to get too big for your house. If it's the kind of variety, like I have a Monstera that it literally, if it was sitting on the floor in here, would reach the ceiling. And I'm to the point where it's like, I don't know if I have to like cut it back, but yeah, but you can't take a little plant and put it in a big pot and expect it to fill it up. You have to slowly work its way up to it. But yeah, they're not like fish. No.
So there's not like a Venus flytrap that could eat me.
No, Tui is not real.
Okay. Because it's so sticky inside.
I think you're thinking of Kid Video. Let me just read the premise of Kid Video, okay? The title sequence explained the plot. Kid Video and his band of the same name, played by live-action performers in the first half of the title sequence, were practicing in a storage unit when an animated villain named Master Blaster appeared and transported them to Master Blaster's home dimension, a cartoon world called The Flip Side. Master Blaster plans to use them as his musical slaves forever. They were rescued by a fairy named Glitter and subsequently spent each episode of the series either helping to free the denizens of the Flip Side from Master Blaster's rule or trying to find a way back to the real world.
Thank you, Tucker.
It's Kid Video.
Thank you. That is it.
That's it?
Hard
Yeah.
sci-fi
That
right
is
there.
amazing. That is
Kid Video.
So amazing. Yep.
Oh, I watched the title sequence while we're sitting here, and the title sequence is amazing. Oh my God. It's all these kids like, let's get our band together, and they're all getting into them.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And then Master Blaster shows up.
Master Blaster, which is funny because I was totally obsessed with Tina Turner in Beyond Thunderdome too. Master Blaster runs bar to town.
Hey, you know who knows a lot about Tina Turner and a lot about Mad Max? The mayor of Fargo, Tim Mahoney.
Really?
I one time gave him a quiz on the radio, and I'm like, who sang? And he was like, Tina Turner. He goes, she's great in Beyond the Thunderdome. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, and I can't wait to see the new Mad Max Fury Road. It's like, what? What? And it just shocked me. And he's like, yeah, I'm a big Tina Turner fan. I love Mad Max.
Yep.
And so I can't imagine Tim Mahoney, Dr. Tim Mahoney, going like by himself.
Nerding out. Like
Fury
fanboying.
Road.
Yeah.
Be like, George Romero's done it again.
Can you imagine him having like a big Tina Turner poster like up in his room at home though?
Or
Like
in his office.
His office.
Where
I've
he's
been
like-
in his office.
Everybody
He was
start
like,
mailing
taped
in.
it's got the tape on the outside.
Tina Turner postcards.
My Aunt Judy went to Tina Turner when she was at the Fargo Dome and was in the front row and was just amazed because at one point Tina like lunged forward and like sweat went all over her.
Awesome.
And my Aunt Judy was like, oh my God. Phaidra, are you doing any shows or anything like that?
Nope, not this year.
No? What
Nothing
if people
coming
want to
up.
reach out to you and they talk about plants?
They can reach me at Baker Nursery, South University, and my email is phaidra@bakernursery.com, PHAIDRA. I respond to that. Stop in and see me. I'll go out to the farm the third week of February. We grow about 500,000 annual plants. So I'll start production here, and then I won't come back to the store until like the plants come in, which will be the end of April.
Phaidra does not use Facebook, but she does use Instagram.
I do. Aluminum_geranium. I love Instagram.
End of podcast. A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews, and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. I consider myself a strong man, but not as strong as some other men, but definitely stronger than most men.